Hey everybody. So if you if you followed us, you will notice that we had technical issues um, earlier um, with our mics and just general. And you know, the devil always wants to fight you when you're doing something. So um, I I apologize to everyone um, who came on earlier and you could not get it full. We're gonna try to put about 30 more minutes on here. I know people have things that they're doing. God willing, we can be able to get about 30 more minutes. I'm gonna bring my son back. I think he um, can actually be heard now. So, Teddy, can you hear us? Are you good?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. So, uh, this is the first episode of the interactive um, broadcast that we're doing, and so I expected that there would be some problems, and so I apologize to everyone who could not stick around, but that's fine. We're gonna load this up on YouTube anyway. Before we were rudely cut off by technical difficulties, we were talking about today. I was asking you a question earlier about how things went as far as you with high school and going through school, as far as history and things go. What do you think was lacking in the in history, and when you were taught history in class? Do you think anything was missing?
Seeing things from one perspective only. We were we were taught that you need to critical think and look at what happened, why these events occurred, what do
Mm-hmm.
you think happened? But it's hard when you are only given one side of the story. You hear about with Columbus. You hear about the Columbus exchange, what happened, but they briefly tell you, maybe in a couple of sentences, about what diseases there were, and then they go right on to, well, outside of that, and it's like, okay, and then they say, okay, just go look it up.
So, can I ask you a question? So, when you were going through school, I mean, I have some understanding of this, but I want people to understand so that they can connect. Um, what was the first time that you heard about African Americans, or I shouldn't say African Americans, that you heard about Black people um, in school? Can you think of what grade or what's the first thing you remember that was taught to you about Black people?
Kindergarten with my yes, kindergarten. We learned about Martin Luther King. That was the very first person we learned about.
Okay. And
And we
so, was there any early world history that was shared with you? Was there anything like talking about how African Americans or Africans contributed to this country, the founding of this country? So you said the first thing that you ever heard was about civil rights, was about Martin Luther
yes.
King Jr. and the civil rights struggle. When they taught you the lesson on Columbus, what stands out in your mind about Columbus?
We were taught about not even really much of Columbus. We were taught about his the voyage he took, and then after that the exchange between the Columbus exchange. That's all that I can recall us learning. The
Mm.
earliest version that I had of Columbus, and that was back in the first grade. First grade.
So no, not really about Columbus, just kind of um, mentioning that he was, and some of the things that he did. So I guess my question, the reason I'm asking this question is because um, I always want to know, and I know I ask you all the time, uh, what was your, what was the first time that you saw a Black person had contributed something to the development of this world, not just this country? Can you give me one name, right, out of your 12 years of school? You're in college, but can you give me one name that was given to you to say, hey, man, this person did this and this helped America or this helped the world?
That would be, or it helped the country, it helped the world. Eh, that would be both Frederick Douglass and Louis Latimer. I had Miss Warren, my from Florida Pitt. She taught us about Louis Latimer and told us that he created the filament in the light bulb and had showed us a picture of a light bulb. And we were just happy because we were interacting with electricity. It was third grade. But
For the people who don't know, who is Louis Latimer?
Louis Latimer he created the filament within the light bulb. He was in the factory that Thomas Edison is given credit for building, where he had all the greatest minds
Well,
in
that's
there.
kudos on your teacher for at least teaching you all who Louis Latimer was. But let me ask you, so we're talking about early world history here. Is there anyone that you knew? So I'm not talking even about the 1900s, 1500s. I'm talking about all the way back into the early 1300s, 500 BC. Can you name for me someone from maybe 500 BC who contributed to the advancement of this world? That was black?
No, the the earliest one, the only people that we heard about BC is the Romans. We only heard about That's the only time that there was BC, and we had only learned about that in the sixth grade, because I remember it came as a surprise that there was letters in place of dates with BC and AD,
Mm.
and I didn't know what that was until
So
later.
you never heard, were you taught in history, people like Hannibal Barca? Um, did you ever hear that name in history class?
Hannibal the Roman?
He wasn't a Roman.
Well, no, he did hate the Romans though.
Yes, he did. But
Yeah, I heard about him, and that wasn't that's a vague memory because we didn't really hear about that much. It was just he came up on the History Channel, and it came up in a video game called Deadliest Warrior. That was it.
so since we've lost a lot of our viewers because of the issues that we had earlier, I want to cover some of that. And I wanted to the reason I asked you all of those questions is because I wanted to talk about what we were talking about before the feed cut out. On this, can you see my screen here?
Yes.
On this screen, you will see that I'm sharing. This is the transatlantic explorations. These are the things that that were put out that showed us how Europeans, and you'll look at the very top of that, and it will say European transatlantic exploration and settlement, and it gives up to 1610. That's important because remember, most times we teach history about 1619, and we always start African American history off with slavery. And the reason I asked you all of those questions that I did was because, and also I want people who watch the rebroadcast of this to think about that too, is that a lot of times we don't know where we come from and where we came from. If you look at this this map, and I'm gonna try to zoom in a little bit here, you'll see, right, that you have a lot of activity that is coming down the coast, right? It comes down the coast and it comes over to Brazil. You'll also see right here, if you can make it out, I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more, that there is a thing down here. Do you see it? It says the Line of Demarcation, Treaty of Tordesillas, right? We're gonna get into that, but I want you to remember that line right here. So when they were telling you all about Columbus, and I've heard all these tales about Columbus, how he sailed over because he thought the world was flat. That was a lie. That was made up. That's all fiction. That's a perfect myth to try to pull you into thinking of this man as heroic. And you will see Columbus's travel, right? As he came over and he went over into Hispaniola, what we now know as Haiti. But what do you notice in this map, Teddy, when you look at it? When you see this map, why do you think you see all of these lines here, right? All of those lines that are over here to the side over here, right? You see Vasco da Gama, you see Vespucci, you see Francis Drake, Magellan, you see all of that, but it's all around the coast of Africa. Did they ever teach you all why that is?
To grab slaves.
So slavery is a part of it. But what you see right here is Spain, right? You see all of these tracks coming out of Spain, later on out of France, but you see Portugal and Spain. And you see all of these lines coming around. So there is a man, there is a culture, and I know I teach you all about this, and I've done many lessons on it, the African Phoenicians. There'll be some people who will come on here who are friends of mine who are history teachers, oh, idiot. But I'm going to talk about the African Phoenicians really quick, because the African Phoenicians were a people who traveled, and they were sailors and they were explorers. And early around 500 BC, there was a Phoenician known as Hanno. And Hanno sailed around the coast of Africa. And he plotted the coast of Africa so that there were maps, right? As a matter of fact, one of the only documents that we know that Hanno existed was his ship log. And so we know that he sailed around the coast of Africa all the way to the other side, because the Phoenicians traded in the east as well as the west. I'm going to share another screen with you and those who watch this, and it's going to talk about the Phoenicians. And give me a moment, since we can now share these screens. Loading it now. But anyway, so what the thing is that when you hit it right on the head when you said that the first person you heard about was Martin Luther King Jr. One of the things that I'm trying to do, and this will be for the reason why I'm not so upset about our technical difficulties, is because this is the first of many sessions. We'll get better over time. But we have to understand that we work into a circular history pattern, right? We are taught history of the same names: Dr. King, Malcolm X. You mentioned it earlier, Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman. How many times did you hear those names through your 12 years of traditional school, of regular school?
Almost every year.
And they go back to these. See, because it's circular, because when you start thinking circular, you no longer start to ask questions outside of the circle. You only ask questions that you're comfortable, that you've been conditioned with. So here's another map. Can you see it? So here we have what is called the Phoenician Civilization, right? I stress this because, as you'll notice, many historians will tell you, well, the Phoenicians came from the Middle East. Well, the Middle East used to be a part of Africa, right? So we allow that, we completely disavow that. But the other thing is that you have to understand is that the Phoenicians traded with everybody. When you saw that earlier map that I showed you, you saw a lot of lines coming around the coast of Africa. You saw a lot of lines going over to the Americas. When you look at this map, you see the Phoenicians had trade rights as of 700 BC. When we look at the other map that I showed you, you had people in the 1400s, 1500s. But wait a minute, these people are told to be discoverers. Columbus is told to us to be a discoverer of the New World. Vasco da Gama, Diaz were said to have came across Africa and discovered new routes into the east. But this map shows you that the Phoenicians were sailing as of 700 BC. You will also see that they went to Spain. You'll see that they went to Europe. They went to Britain. We are finding remnants of the Phoenicians as far as Britain. They had ports there where they traded tin. We're finding remnants of them all throughout. When we talk about the Carthaginians, I asked you about Hannibal Barca. Hannibal Barca was a Carthaginian, but he was also a Phoenician. The Phoenicians are mentioned in the Holy Bible because they traded and they helped the children of Israel in the Bible by helping to build the Holy Temple, providing the sacred cloths. They were known for their purple cloths. The Phoenicians were also traders and spices and jewels that were used to adorn the Ark of Covenant. They go back very far. And the Phoenicians were a tricultural people. So they not only were they black, they welcomed anyone, but they were not a conquering people. They did not go into these lands to conquer. They wanted to trade. They wanted to share information. So when we go back and we look at the map that I showed you earlier, right? And we see these men who went across, and many will be mad. They get mad when this is pointed out, but this is historically true. When you see these people who went out, you will notice that they all hugged this coast because they already knew how to get around, because the Phoenicians had told them. The Phoenicians had left it. The Phoenicians left evidence and left information that was received by the Muslims because they traded with the Muslims. And in turn, the Muslims, in trading with the Greeks, trading with the Romans, trading with the Spanish, this was all provided. So before any of these men sailed, there were black people, tricultural people, who were sailing all over the world. But you're not taught that. Why do you think that is?
Well, white supremacy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of that, but there's also an idea that once a thing is taught and it is accepted, many don't want to accept anything new. When I'm asking you a question about history, and this is for everybody who was out there, because I pretty much let this conversation be just us, but I'm going to ask this question. How do you look at history? Is history a thing of facts, or is history a thing of questions? Give me your honest opinion.
I personally would believe that it is more of opinion based.
Okay. Why would you say that?
Because in terms of conqueror, when you look at conqueror, whoever wins gets the privilege to write history.
To write history. Okay.
So if you went in and slaughtered a bunch of people and built statues of your men, yeah, we did this. These are the people that helped in conquering this land. Meanwhile, on the victim side, or the people that are slaughtered and don't no longer exist, they're just lost to history, or because they're shunned away, simply because, well, you lost. So there's no need.
So you're saying that history is made by the conquerors. The conquerors make a decision on on how history is written.
Yes.
So that's true. But let me add something else to you. If I asked you, or asked anyone out there, why did Columbus come over here? Why did all of these men that you see who came across this ocean, why did they come over here to the Americas?
I personally believe that they came here for wealth. They knew it was over here. Even though they came with false pretenses of, oh, we're going to give you religion. God wills it. We're going to we're, we're going to make you less savage. We're
Okay.
going to give you our clothes. You're going to inherit our way of life.
So you are absolutely right, but you are also right to know that. Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a significant question here. Where did you learn that from? Who taught you that?
That came from home. You did.
And so, when you went to school, did they teach you about the conqueror?
No, they the last thing that we heard that ever about conqueror was conquistadors, because you can't hide that name. A conquistador is Spanish for conqueror.
And so
That's the
they bragged about their conquering, right? They wanted you to know that they were conquerors, right? I'm
yes.
gonna
And
I'm gonna
even
read
then,
something to you, and I know you've heard this before, but I'm putting this out here for the people who don't know. When the I'm so happy that you brought up the conquistadors. The conquistadors came over. That is true, to conquer, and we know that they came to conquer because they had to. The Spanish required them to recite something. Do you remember me talking to you about this once? They had to recite something. It was called the requirement. And you're absolutely right to talk about the church, because wealth and the church. Columbus himself said that wealth elevated you to the heights of God. That was his words. But I'm going to read this to you. This is actually a summarized version. When the Spanish came over and they made their way over here, let me add first that when the Phoenicians came over to trade, a lot of these men came over exactly to conquer. History shows it, their own words show it. But they were required to recite this by the church. And it was said that I implore you to recognize the church as a lady. In the name of the Pope, take the king as Lord of this land and obey his mandates. If you do not do it, I tell you that with the help of God, I will enter powerfully amongst you. I will make war everywhere and in every way that I can. I will subject you to the yoke of obedience to the church and to Christ and his majesty. I will take your women and children and I will make them slaves. The deaths and injuries that will occur, that you will receive from us, will be on your head and your own fault, not that of his majesty, nor the judgment of the Lord, but as a right by us to enforce the gospel in this land. Now, oftentimes, the requirement was said in Spanish to people who did not speak that language.
yeah, because they were of Spain descent.
And so when the people were like, what's going on? They didn't know what they were talking about. Columbus's own records show that they cut noses and ears off. They massacred babies. They threw children into the fires. It was so bad that Columbus was actually recalled at one point back to Spain from Hispaniola for the abuses that he was doing, that he did. Now, why did the indigenous people welcome these conquerors? Because as you read, they came over, and the indigenous people helped them. They tell you that, right? They helped them, and
Yes.
then all of a sudden, what happened?
Slaughter and massacre happened.
No, I'm not asking what you were taught, because you're different. What did you get? What were you taught at school?
We were taught that there was Thanksgiving, there was peace, there was where friends were happy, and that they did not come over there for any false pretenses, only to make them established. That's what they. That's the word that they used.
And so they were over to help. They came over with the church. They brought religion to the savage. But let's look at this thing here again that I was showing you earlier. And I know we're trying to make up for some time here, but you'll notice. Can you see it right here? Right here at the bottom, right here, it says the line of demarcation. Do you see that?
Yes.
And it says the Treaty of Tordesillas, 1494. Do you know what that is? Did they teach you all what that is?
No.
So we know that Columbus came over here in 1493. And I'm focusing on Columbus because if people say, well, why are you picking on Columbus? Bill, Columbus is the only person other than Jesus Christ that has a pre-Columbian and a post-Columbian, right? So he is used as a marker. So we have to use him as that marker. But when Columbus came over in 1493, he sailed over, 92 and 93, you see this path right here on the map. He sailed over, and he initially was friendly with the natives, right? He said he praised them for the way that they carried themselves and the way they looked. But when he realized that they could be conquered, it changed. And on his way back from his first trip, Columbus was coming for Spain. You see this right here? He was coming from Spain. But when he went back, he didn't go right back to Spain. He went to Portugal. Why do you think he went to Portugal?
To get away from, I can't remember that.
I'm asking you, what did they teach you about that?
What they taught us about was the wedding of Isabel and Ferdinand.
Okay.
And how they gave him ships to get over here. But along the way, he didn't return right back to Spain. He went to Portugal.
Hey, feel free, ladies and gentlemen, who was on here, I'm sorry, Teddy, to comment and offer your own understanding. If you're on, we got about 6 people on here. Hey, sorry that we were taking off earlier. Get on, ask questions. Don't let my son, he's doing a good job. And I'm so proud of him. But, come on, ask questions, get involved. Well, go ahead, Teddy.
Yeah, he went, I know they did tell us that he didn't go right back to Spain. But they didn't tell us that he went to Portugal.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that he went to Portugal. He went to Portugal. Columbus initially went to Portugal to ask for financing to go to the New World. Not that it wasn't called the New World, right? But he knew that the Portuguese had already been over to other islands in the middle of the Atlantic. He knew that there were maps. He had those maps. And so Columbus went to Portugal because Portugal was chiefly trading with the Muslims. And Portugal gave them maps and received maps and had information. They were the people to go to. Columbus himself said that he had sailed before the Americas to the Iceland. And we know the Piraeus map that goes back as far as Alexander the Great that we don't talk about either, that is not taught in school, had the coasts of the polar regions plotted out, had the coast of the Americas plotted out. And it goes back again to the idea of the Phoenicians and other people who had traveled across the planet well before this era, as they call it in your history books, the Age of Discovery. Or as we see at the top of this map I put here, European Transatlantic exploration and settlement, right? How they came over. But getting back to the idea that Portugal had information that he needed and that he had used. The actual king of Portugal, when Columbus set out to come to the Americas, had threatened that he would send warships out to intercept Columbus. That's also not taught. And when Columbus came back, he went to Portugal. He brought indigenous people from the Americas with him who sat at a dinner with him and the king. And he showcased these people. And the king of Portugal asked Columbus to go to the Spanish court, who he had been arguing with the Pope, because the Pope was in power. He asked Columbus to support him in drawing what is known as the Line of Demarcation, or what we also know as the doctrine of discovery. And what you will see on here is a line. You see this line right here? Right?
Yeah.
The Portuguese said that we want everything from that line going east. And anything beyond this line, you could have. Why do you think they did that?
Anything beyond this.
Anything going east this way, I'll mark it for you. Anything going east, going this way, right? They want it. Anything that went west, going this way, right? Columbus them could keep. Why do you think they did that?
So that they could bring gold and riches back to Portugal, and that he just keep whatever's over there.
Anybody out there got a question, an answer why you may think that they did that? Before I give you the answer? I guess not. I'll tell you why. The Portuguese, again, had already been trading with the Muslims. They had already made their way around. Diaz had already gone around the coast. They had already had the information that they had gotten from the Turks and people and people in the West. They had already opened up those trade routes based on Phoenician trade routes that had been given to them. And this is one of the reasons why Portugal, their names for their ships come from a Phoenician Egyptian word, caravel, right? So they knew that there was wealth to be had in the East. They didn't know about that wealth that was going to be further. And the people who, the information that they had got from the coast of Brazil, what we know as Brazil now, told them that there was wealth there. There was gold there.
That's what they said. They said there was gold.
And so I go back to the question I asked earlier. Why do you think all these men sailed around here? Why do you think they all came down this way?
Because they wanted that. They wanted wealth.
They wanted that gold that the Portuguese were assured was there. Now, it's also important is that slavery in the East precedes slavery in the West. So they had already, when you see Benin, what is important about Benin? It's one of the few places and Songhai that are listed on this map. I know they teach this to you all in school, but why are those two places important?
Because
you remember?
I can't recall. I just barely.
Because they were hubs of slave trade. They were hubs of early slave trade. Not chattel slavery, but indentured slavery. And so they could go here and open up these routes around Benin, and they could open up what is the early slave trade. Because remember, once they came over to the the Americas, they initiated what is the Incomedia system with the indigenous people, and they killed them. They wiped them out. But many of them saw black, dark-skinned indigenous people, who the indigenous people who there told them they came from the east and the south, right? They had came into these lands and mingled with them. And so they knew that slavery was financial. So it is not lost to us that the Portuguese, if you go search and do a Google search right now, the Portuguese were the leaders in slavery, in African American slavery. We are connected to all of this struggle here.
Yes, we
Not only
believe.
because our ancestors grafted the way of how to get there, but also because once they got over here, they sold us from the South Americas all the way up to the Americas eventually. Now, many people get mad when you say that. This is not about guilt. This is about a reality of history that is not taught to our kids because it's uncomfortable. I wanted to do this session because I want to provide this information to our young people. But additionally, right, I also want us to actually look at history as it is. There is another map I'm going to share. I'm going to stop this screen or stop this share. And there's another one that I want to share. I don't think that's it. You get bear with me just for a moment. But I want to share this screen because when I was looking through early world history, when I was about your age, when I first started reading, really getting heavy into history, I didn't know that there was no connection to me about where I had come from, where my ancestors came from. The only thing that was ever offered to me was slavery. The idea that my ancestors, your ancestors, were slaves.
And fought to be free. That's all they ever mentioned.
Right? And there was no connection as to what had happened before slavery. Why slavery was a issue, a huge issue, right? None of that. I'm having problems trying to find this map, but none of that was shared with me. So I wanted to go out and find. Let's go back to the Phoenician map while I'm trying to find this other one, because we don't have a lot of time. I want to do this hour and provide some information. And I appreciate you, my son, for bearing with your dad today.
It's all right. It's better to come.
So, let's look at this Phoenician map here, okay? What do you know about this area right here, Carthage?
Carthage.
If you had to look at this map, I guess what I'm saying is, if you had to look at this, if you had to really kind of zoom in right here, what do you notice between Carthage? What is this over here?
Italy. This is Europe.
Right? But who lived in Italy and Europe? What famous, well-known, highly lauded culture comes from that area?
The Spanish?
You said it earlier. The Romans.
Oh, right. That's where
the
Rome
Greeks. Right?
Yeah.
And you see trade up and down up in here. When you learn about Hannibal Barca and the Punic Wars, right? Why were those wars fought?
And they say that the Punic War was fought for many different reasons.
Okay, give me one of the reasons why it was fought. As I go try to find this other thing, give me the reason.
They said they was trying to expand land. They wanted more wealth.
Who wanted more?
The Holy Roman Empire, I think. No, I think I got it messed up because I don't believe they were around that time.
So the reason why it is important to know this is because the Punic War happened. When Hannibal Barca went over there and killed 11,000 men, right? Invaded into Italy and killed Romans, right? And killed 9,000. Can you imagine 11,000, 9,000? These thousands of men being killed in one day before the advent of gunpowder and guns and weapons. These men were fighting, and Hannibal Barca created ways of fighting that destroyed one of what was to be known as one of the most powerful armies in the history of the world. And these wars happened because, you're right, the Romans wanted to control and to conquer. I'm not making that up. That is what it is. And I'm encouraging you to go read that history in depthly. And I'm going to always provide resources and references to do that. But what they did was they wanted to take over those Phoenician lands. And they did. They went in to Carthaginians. They had huge wars and battles. Even eventually, Hannibal Barca was overwhelmed. But let me ask you a question that's probably going to tick some other people off. What color was Hannibal Barca?
Black.
Why do you say that?
Only because of college, as of only 2 years ago, that I figured that out. Because the statue of him, they had him in his face was sculpted like something from European descent. So I always assumed that, okay, that's Hannibal. But when you look at it and you see, okay, he was a black man who descended from Africa. They did not tell us that he was a Phoenician.
He was a Canaanite. You know what a Canaanite is?
Yes, I hear about them in the Bible.
Repeat that, because we can be clear. You hear about them where?
In the Bible.
Right?
The Canaanites.
So I won't. There's a great book, and I'm gonna give them a plug. Pastor Henry Razor wrote a book, Beautifully Black and Blessed. It's a great book. I think I got it over here somewhere. And he kind of goes into that more than what I'm going to go into it tonight. And he talks about, right, how the Bible tells these stories and shows you how these men came up out of Africa, the sons of Noah, and how the Bible even kind of tells you the story of who these people are, because they're mentioned all throughout the Bible. But yes, he was a Canaanite. He was a Carthaginian. He was a Phoenicians. And so when the Romans decided that they wanted to conquer those lands, they came into conflict with each other. And we'll go into the Punic War later on in another broadcast. But I wanted us to understand how significant the Phoenician civilization is. I also want you to know, why do you think that you don't hear about the Phoenicians? Before I ever brought it up to you, did they teach you about Phoenicians? And I did see you people out there too. Did they teach you about Phoenicians?
No, not for me at least.
So many historians.
The only thing I hear about the Phoenician was that the very last time I heard about the word Phoenician, it brought up the word phoenix, which was a mythical bird. And we were like, okay, that's wonderful.
And who loved the phoenix? What culture?
The Asians.
The Asians do too. That's important. Keep going. Who else?
Let's see. There was
what
Asians.
Famous culture wrote myths about the phoenix?
I don't know. I only know that I can't remember the dynasty right now, but I know that one of the Asian dynasties really did idolize the phoenix. That's what they had taught us. That's the only time I last remember seeing the word Phoenician, and then relating it to the mythical bird phoenix, and it came from the Asian dynasty. One of them, I can't remember, and I remember I had to look that up on my own because it was a research paper. So I just stumbled across that.
So the Phoenix word, the name, right? It's significant that we say that because they were known for their color, their crimson, their when Homer decided to use that name Phoenix, the mythical bird, the Phoenix, it carries that name, but it's because that name was reverenced, right? That's a reverenced name. That's a name that the Greeks allowed in myths, the Asians allowed in myths, and it went all over the world. That goes along with the idea, again, of what I'm telling you of travel, right? Of how words travel, how people travel. When you're trading, you're not trying to conquer, you're trying to connect, you're trying to gain something. And they went all over to go do that. That's what I was trying to get you to go into, but that is what that is. For some reason, we're not seeing a chat on here, but I did see some. I logged on here briefly to go see people. Someone said ancient Egypt, gold rush. Did they know about the riches in Africa? Yes, they did. Yes, they did. The Bible tells you that Solomon, in building the temple of God, uh, he went and befriended a Phoenician king. And a few weeks ago, I had spoke about this with Pastor Razor's church and talking about how the Queen of Sheba, because we laud Solomon, right? In the Bible, Christians do. But what we don't remember is that Solomon was a nobody. He was the son of David. He was a nobody. And but because the Phoenician king, it was Tyrus was his name, loved David, he wanted to make a covenant, have an agreement with his son. And he wanted to help him build this temple. So Solomon asked if his people could ride in ships around the coast of Africa. This is in the Bible. To the land of Ethiopia, around the backside of Africa. And they made such an impression that the Queen of Sheba came to see Solomon with all of her riches. She made Solomon worth something to the rest of the known world. So they did know very much about what was going on, because remember, they had ascribed religion to wealth, and wealth to domination and to conquering. And when our next session next week, we're going to spend more time talking about domination. We touched on it tonight, but we're going to spend more time talking about domination. We have a few more minutes, Teddy. So I'm going to ask you, since I can't really see a lot of people's comments, and we'll fix that later. But what else would you like to talk about as far as early world history? Or would you like to share, I should say, because you have a lot of knowledge yourself.
Well, I spent the last couple of minutes looking it up, and I remember it was the Ming Dynasty that liked the Phoenix. But going back to your question, going back to early world history? Well, the earliest thing that they ever taught us about was Pangea, and that's touch and go. They don't really stay consistent with it. But I did always like that fact of a whole Earth. How would that work? And it all breaking apart.
And the lives and the things that it affected.
Yes.
I think that a lot of that, when we talk about the separating of the world and the theories and the ideas behind that, are very important. But I think that we have to understand, and what is not often told to a lot of people, is how big, and I don't say this to just laud blacks, but Africa is a huge continent. And it used to be bigger. When we talk about the Middle East, that was a decision made later on to separate it from Africa. And that is also not really covered. And so a lot of as we still share this map, this Phoenician map, you see the lands, right, of darker people, interracially mixed people who did not see color as a separator. We'll get to that in much, much later sessions, but who didn't see color as a separator.
Yeah, that goes back to the idea of race. Where do we get that from?
It's a myth. It's a made up idea. It's a way to separate. It's a way to denigrate. It's a way to tell someone that you're the other. But because we have invested so much time, thousands of years now, in the idea of the other, I'll tell you, before Columbus, we mentioned Columbus earlier. You talked about the Columbus Exchange. Before Columbus, what were people in Europe called?
Europeans?
Europeans. Right? They had different areas. They were, maybe you were Italian, but for the most part, you were a collective of people living in Europe. I'm Italian, I'm Spanish, but we're all in Europe. Mm-hmm. After they came over to the Americas to conquer and to control, everybody over there became the other, the savage. And then it became about brown, then eventually black, and what is white. That was the separation. That's what happened. That was one of the things that Columbus, the exploration and the legacy of Columbus. After Columbus, it was okay to torture those who were infidels, who were outside of the wisdom and the guidance of God. It was okay to murder and kill them because you were trying to bring them to the faith and the understanding of God. So that is a part of the Columbian Exchange also that we don't talk about.
Yeah, all they tell us is that they exchanged. The worst thing that the Columbus Exchange brought that we were taught was disease, which killed a lot. That's all they really went into. They didn't really go into what Columbus really did when he was over there. I didn't learn that until my third year.
So in closing, as we get ready to close this, because we've been on we're coming up to an hour on the rebroadcast. We've actually been doing it for an hour and 15 minutes, given we had to break off. But do you think that you learned more in school, or did you learn more from your interaction, say, with us as a family, me, your mother, and our own reading and studying and trying to understand what's going on in this world?
Definitely learned more at home, because school, to be honest, the teachers, what they did is that they gave us a history book and said, go read this book, kids. There's your homework. And we don't know how old that curriculum is. And they just give it to you and just say, this should pacify for the standard right now. You go read.
Mm-hmm.
And we just, okay, I read this. And then after a while, it's uninteresting because all you ever hear is about chattel, indentured slavery, still fighting to be free. And it's like, okay, that's wonderful.
I see your cousin, he posted, he said, in school, they basically said Native Americans were too smart and sneaky.
Yes. Especially, that's with all the indigenous people. We told them how to hunt. We told them how to do it without killing the whole stock. We taught them how to clothe themselves so that they could stay warm in the winter. Because if you remember, they died. They were close to death in the first winter in the New World. So And then it became, well, we can't trust them because they won't give us that precious metal.
Oh, we didn't even talk about the metal. So one of the things that I always, and I remember when I found this out, I remember telling you all this, you're a lot younger. I used to have arguments with historians because, they're like, you don't have a degree, Eddie. How you tell? But I research, and you all know I read a lot. But one of the things that when I was going to stood out to me, and I'm going to say this as we get ready to close out on this first program, is guanine. A lot of people don't know, but Columbus knew that blacks had been over, and we'll get into this next week. That blacks had been to the New World before he did, and I know you know this because I taught you all this. But the reason why they knew was because when Columbus came over to Hispaniola, he was looking for gold. He knew gold was there because the Portuguese told him, "It's gold over there," right? And so when he came, he demanded gold, and the indigenous people had spears that were laden with gold and silver and tin, right? Spearheads. And he was amazed by these spearheads. And he asked, this is documented, he documented it. Where did you get these spearheads from? And how did you know how to make them? And they told him that black men, dark-skinned men, had came from the east and the south. And they had bought gold and taught them how to build these spearheads. Now, they had kept going and they had gone on to go further explore. But what's funny is that the South Africans and the Africans that Columbus knew about from the Portuguese, because they knew about Africans, they knew that the Africans called their gold guanine. And the indigenous people over in the Americas called it guanine also. Secondarily, Africans like to smell their gold. So they would put spices and things inside of the gold. And they would smell the gold. That's how they knew it was real gold to them. And the indigenous people over here, by Columbus's own documentation, did the same thing. But wait, we're taught that Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas. We're taught that all of those men that I showed you on that map who came over, they were the discoverers. They were the people who brought knowledge and understanding over. And as we close, we have to understand why that was taught. Supremacy is not about color. Supremacy is about a mentality. And when we teach our kids from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, that their ancestors did nothing in the formation or the furthering of this world, and that the only thing that they're known for, as you said when we first started talking again, is civil rights, struggling and asking to be called men and women, and you don't know your history. You aren't taught it. You're taught these things that we covered today, these things that we exposed today. And this is why I wanted this program and why I refused to allow us to be cut out today, despite us having technical issues and whatever. We were going to get this information out, and we will be back here next week to do it again and go further and deeper and better. But we need to understand why these things are hidden to us. Why this line of demarcation right here in the age of discovery is still used against us. We'll cover that next week. Still a legal thing that the American government uses to take land from Native Americans.
Oh yeah, eminent domain.
We need to understand that Our history is more vast than 1619 and slavery. We are more than someone with a whip and a boot in our back. We are a part of this land. We are a part of these people. We need to understand that the tricultural idea was whites, blacks, red, yellow, whatever, living together in peace. And that was what was normal until the conqueror came. I thank all of you who stuck around with me and Teddy and through our technical difficulties. I didn't see a lot of questions come through StreamYard, but I did get on to see the questions were being asked, and we'll work on that next week too. Thank you all so much. I think in the end, this was a very good session. I really appreciate my son. I am always so proud of him. He ain't gonna make me cry. I love my son, and I just I asked him to do this with me so that young people could understand that our history is important. I thank all of you. I thank you for sticking with us. And please, please share this video for those who probably logged in and had to leave. We're going to upload it to YouTube, and we're going to be back next week. I'm going to make a decision between, will probably be Thursday next week. We'll do another hour, and we'll go a little bit deeper and go into some post-Columbian history and open up some more avenues of understanding. Thank you all. Have a blessed and beautiful rest of your evening.